Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We've been away for a week, waiting for some more NBA rumors to come to us, Sap, and today delivered as LeBron James signs an extension with the Los Angeles Lakers, a 2-year deal worth a reported $97.1 million. Not bad for a guy who's already a billionaire, Sap. And so this will keep him with the Lakers until the 2025 season, I believe, Sap. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So 3 more years in LA this year, and then the 2-year extension takes him through the 2024-25 season. So that'll be 7 years in LA, just in time for Bronny to be drafted by the LA Lakers in 2024 and play 1 year with his dad. Now, Bronny's starting to move up on the rankings, right? I mean, I think he's in the mid-30s right now. He's got 1 more year of high school left, then he's going to spend 1 year in college, and then most likely then go to the NBA when LeBron will be finishing up his career with the Lakers. So maybe that possibility exists. But it's good for the Lakers because they have the stability of LeBron for the next 3 years. You have Anthony Davis signed. You only have 1 more year, Russell Westbrook, see what happens with that. And then everybody's just on hold waiting for Kyrie Irving to see if he ends up in LA. And of course, it all goes back to what's going to happen with Kevin Durant, because that's the big thing in the NBA. It's dominated the offseason. And I know we're going to talk about that. But for the Lakers, this is what they needed to do to at least lend that stability with LeBron James being there for 3 more years.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't seem to me like there was any real jeopardy of him leaving. You know, it's all the reports. I know that they've been, the past couple of seasons have been frustrating for them, but, his whole family lives there. Obviously, you mentioned his son, Bronny. His other son, too, is becoming, a NBA level prospect. I think he's just a freshman in high school. So still, a lot of time to see whether he develops. But it just seems like he's very comfortable in LA. Sap, and it seemed unlikely to me that he would, at this point in his career, pick up and move locations. The only place that we thought may be a potential destination for him would be Cleveland again. But this pretty much, I feel like, guarantees that he's going to end his career with the Lakers.
Yeah, without question. And again, not many players leave LA. Shaq had to leave LA. He was kind of forced out of LA. They traded him because Kobe gave management some sort of ultimatum. It's either me or Shaq, and management went with Kobe. But for the most part, when players go to the Lakers, or even now the Clippers, when you look at Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who've been there for a few years, I'd expect those 2 guys to retire as members of the Clippers unless they try to move one of them at some point. But yeah, you go to LA. So much of the league lives in LA. So many players are from LA, whether it be Harden and Westbrook and Kawhi and Paul George, so many players that are actually from LA, and then a bunch of other players actually live in LA, because why wouldn't you? It's a great place to live. The weather, you can find a pickup game at any moment, and there's so much money to be made off of the court. And that's where LeBron has doubled his net worth, really, since he's been out in LA. Now he's a billionaire, so he's going to finish up his career with the Lakers. And no surprise that this took place.
No, I think that the league widely expected it to get done. I'm sure that, behind the scenes, there was some, discussion from LeBron saying, my expectation if I sign this extension is you do this, that, and the other thing in terms of trying to make sure the team stays as competitive as possible. Obviously, you can't, guarantee those things, but I'm sure that he made his position pretty well known, that he expects the team to be competing for a championship, and putting themselves in the best position to do that. Whether it be, via trade or free agency or something like that. So, that those sort of details will come out. But LeBron obviously isn't going to be content playing on a team that, like last year, didn't even make the playoffs. His expectation is to compete for a championship. So I'm sure he made that known in saying, I'll sign this extension, but you guys owe me one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it gives the Lakers that building block of LeBron James. And if he can give you 65 games this year, that would be excellent. If Anthony Davis can give you 65 games, that would be a coup as well. And then you just see what happens with Russell Westbrook. Now, Darvin Ham is the new coach. He seems like he's going to be a bit more forceful than maybe Frank Vogel was, but who knows how long that's going to last, because you've got 3 superstars on that team. Even though Westbrook doesn't play like a superstar anymore, he carries himself like a superstar. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And again, A lot of this depends on if Kyrie Irving ends up being a Laker. And again, we're less than 2 months away from the start of the season. So it's going to be fascinating the next 2 months heading into the start of the season.
Absolutely. And, that sort of shifts our attention to what's going on across the country from the Lakers in Brooklyn and the Nets. And we've heard about this meeting between Nets owner Joe Tsai and Kevin Durant, where essentially Durant gave Tsai an ultimatum saying, I will be here, but if you want me to be here, you got to fire Sean Marks, the GM, and Steve Nash, the head coach. Obviously, that's what's being reported. We don't know that that's necessarily, a fact, but, it seems to indicate that Kevin Durant is unhappy with a lot of things in Brooklyn, not just the fact that the team was swept in the first round by the Celtics, and that there's all this Kyrie Irving drama, but it seems to indicate that he doesn't have faith in what the team does from a coaching or a management standpoint. Joe Tsai, almost immediately after that meeting, did tweet out his support for Steve Nash and Sean Marks. So that does lend a lot of credence to that rumor, Sap. The NBA, typically the superstars win these arguments. To me, you're the coach, and it's pretty easy to say, okay, we'll side with the superstar. It seems like Joe Tsai was really frustrated with all the drama that went on last year with the Nets.
Well, yeah, this went up to ownership level, right? And Joe Tsai is a guy who's worth $9 billion. He's a founder. Not bad. He's a founder of Alibaba, which is essentially China's version of Amazon. So I don't think he's ever really sat across the desk from someone and been intimidated. Normally, when you're worth $9 billion, not that I would know, but if you're worth $9 billion, you're pretty confident in yourself, and you're not going to be intimidated by anybody, let alone Kevin Durant. But I think Kevin Durant handled this part of it really smartly by coming up with this ultimatum. Now, apparently Kevin Durant's not happy with himself as the general manager, because he's really been the general manager since he went to Brooklyn 3 years ago with Kyrie, right? They went there and claimed they were running things. In fact, after the Celtics swept the Brooklyn Nets in the postseason back in April, it was Kyrie Irving says, yeah, me and Kevin and Sean and Joe are going to sit down and figure out what we got to do here. So Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant carry themselves as the general manager. So Durant can't be too happy with himself. And he handpicked Steve Nash to come and be his head coach. Nash had some relationship with Durant in Golden State. So Durant, who never seems to be happy, I think did play this smartly, because now he's giving Joe Tsai an ultimatum. I'll stay. You've got to fire Marks and Nash or trade me. I think he handled that well. Now, a couple of days afterwards, reports came out that Durant would rather retire than play for the Brooklyn Nets. And he denied that rumor. He refuted it, which I thought was a mistake on his part. Because if that gets out there that he's going to retire unless the Nets trade him, then that's going to force the Nets' hand at that point, that they have to trade him. And at that point, you're going to see more and more teams get involved. And that's going to be the key to this, Jed, is how many teams get involved in serious discussions for Kevin Durant. If there's only one or two, then the Nets are going to have to take the best deal offered. But if 6 or 7 teams get involved, it's like anything else. If 6 or 7 people are interested in your house, the price will go up. So that's going to be awfully important for the Brooklyn Nets going forward.
Yeah, and right now it seems like it's been the same teams that have been circling Kevin Durant, or at least been rumored about, the Celtics, the Raptors in the Eastern Conference. Now we're hearing a little bit about the 76ers. And then in the West, we've been hearing for a long time about the Suns, though that seems not realistic. Oh, and the Heat. So those teams have been, the teams that have been talked about, but we talked about this like about a month ago, Sap, or a couple of weeks ago. I think that the Mavericks and the Nuggets should be fully involved in this. I'm surprised that they're not. But it seems unclear what the asking price is. Is it picks? Is it a player in picks? Is it multiple players? Is it multiple players in picks? I'm not sure.
Okay, if I'm Brooklyn, I want someone in return who is an all-star caliber player. So that leads you to believe that the Celtics and New Orleans have probably the best players available for that. Jaylen Brown in Boston, Brandon Ingram in New Orleans, who I think are pretty comparable players. They came out of the same draft. Ingram has been called junior Kevin Durant, or a poor man's Kevin Durant. We know how good Jaylen Brown is. So those would be two teams that would be, I think, good trade partners with Brooklyn. Also, Philadelphia, they're not going to trade James Harden or Joel Embiid. In fact, if they got Kevin Durant, then they would have a big three of Durant, Embiid, and Harden, which to me would be the most fascinating big three in the league, not just on the court, but off the court as well, with Doc Rivers coaching it. Sign me up for that. That would be absolutely great to watch. But now you're looking at who? Tobias Harris because of the money, Tyrese Maxey, who's an ascending young player, and maybe Matisse Thybulle. So maybe that's something that Philadelphia could do. New Orleans and the Celtics have that one player that they could trade in a massive trade with Brooklyn, who at least gives Brooklyn back an all-star caliber player. Now, the other details have to be worked out. Obviously, Marcus Smart or Derek White would be the second player, one of those two, and then draft picks. New Orleans has some other pieces. It's not going to be Zion Williamson because you want Durant to play with Williamson and CJ McCollum, maybe one of the young players in picks. Denver makes sense because I think Durant with Nikola Jokic would be fascinating to watch. And they do have Jamal Murray, who's right there with Brandon Ingram and Jaylen Brown. I mean, same draft, right? And pretty comparable player. Then you throw in Michael Porter, who's a very talented guy, but not durable. Maybe that's a trade partner. Dallas is interesting, but they just don't have the pieces. They have Luka, who I wouldn't trade straight up for Kevin Durant. He's better than Kevin Durant. He's 10 years younger. He's ascending. Durant is descending. Who's the second best player on Dallas? They don't really have anybody that is anywhere close to Jamal Murray or Jaylen Brown.
It's like Tim Hardaway Jr. It's not
So they're not really a trade partner. Now, the other team I would throw in there, and I do have a column up on Full Press Coverage talking about the Celtics and 76ers as the two leads, but three other surprise teams would be Denver and New Orleans. I'll also throw Toronto in there because Masai Ujiri, who we both think is the best executive in the league, ready, willing, and able to make a big deal. They did it 4 years ago, knowing that Kawhi Leonard was probably going to spend 1 year in Toronto. Well, Kevin Durant signed for 4 years and apparently grew up as a Toronto Raptors fan because he loved Vince Carter. So, and I think Toronto would be a pretty good city for Kevin Durant. I think it would be a kind of a place that he could go and not maybe face the backlash that he would in, say, Boston or Philadelphia or even New York, where he is now. But again, Brooklyn, they're not stupid. They would want Scotty Barnes. And I'll be honest with you, of all these players rumored to be traded for Kevin Durant, I would not trade Scotty Barnes if I'm Toronto, because I think his ceiling is actually higher than Jaylen Brown's and Brandon Ingram's. I think he's potentially a top 10 player. Now is it Pascal Siakam, who's the lead in that potential trade? So this is all going to be fascinating. The key for Brooklyn is to try to get as many teams involved so the asking price goes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, like you said, there's some of these teams that seem like on paper they'd be good fits, but we haven't really heard that they've been involved at all. The Brandon Ingram thing seemed like, okay, that's like a, natural fit in terms of the player that Brooklyn likes, but it seems like New Orleans isn't interested in making a trade at all, whether it be with Ingram or not. And then, like you said, we talked about, Dallas, Denver, we haven't heard them rumored at all. So it's really the same teams that have been rumored, and it doesn't seem like any team right now is increasing their offer. I think the Celtics have that, standing offer of Jaylen Brown and Derek White. They're not going to increase it. Whatever, I'm sure, like you said, Toronto, it's probably Siakam and picks. It doesn't seem like they're going to increase that offer. Miami, they really are kind of limited with what they can offer. Mm-hmm. It's just Hero and Duncan Robinson, because they can't trade Adebayo to the Nets because Ben Simmons on the Nets because of the way those contracts work. I don't think that's a very attractive offer. So they really don't have the ability to up it unless they get a third team involved. So yeah, Sap, I mean, you're 100% right that the Nets are at this point really just need to create some sort of bidding war. And so, if I'm Sean Marks, their GM, you're trying to utilize these social media channels and create fake rumors if you can to get, to do whatever you can to get more teams involved in this, because right now it's slow going.
And if there's a candidate to be a third team to get involved, to me, it would be Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz, because he loves doing that. He'll sense that opportunity to get a lot of value back. And we know that there are ongoing talks with Utah and the New York Knicks about Donovan Mitchell. So maybe there's a 3 or a 4-way trade involved there. I don't think Durant would end up in Utah, but Ainge could get even more draft picks. And he's got a bunch of them that he got for Rudy Gobert. So a lot of these things can happen. And again, the start of the season is October 18th. So we're 2 months away from that. Camp is about 4 or 5 weeks away. So you want to try to get this resolved beforehand. And I don't know if Durant would actually go all the way in and say, I'm done. Either trade me or I'm retiring. I know he loves basketball, but he's also got a lot of money already. He's worth about $500 million when you add in his salaries, endorsements. He's invested his money wisely in Silicon Valley. So, I mean, he could essentially walk away. And then at some point it would get resolved, right? The league would probably step in and say, we can't have one of the 5 best players in the league sitting out because he doesn't want to play for the Brooklyn Nets. And look, Joe Tsai is a guy who, again, worth $9 billion. I think, the way he made his fortune was not easy. I don't think it ever is, but he is someone who is not afraid to take chances and stand by his ground. And I think he's going to do that. So this is still ongoing, and it's dominated the offseason because it wasn't really a great free agent class, right? There weren't a lot of huge moves in the offseason. Yeah, Rudy Gobert went from Utah to Minnesota. And, there's some other trades that took place, but this is the thing we're all waiting for because this is an all-time great player that's made available. I've said it before. If Kevin Durant gets traded, this would be the biggest trade or the best player traded somewhat close to his prime. I think he's a little past his prime, but it would be not quite comparable, but close to when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was traded by the Milwaukee Bucks to the LA Lakers back in 1975 when Kareem was 28, right in his prime. He was the best player in basketball. And the Bucks got back some good players for him. Junior Bridgman, Brian Winters, Dave Myers, Elmer Smith. I mean, they got 4 good players, and they were a somewhat contending team for close to a decade. But Kareem's Kareem. And, of course, we know he went to LA and won 5 championships, although helped a lot by Magic Johnson. So this would be the biggest move in the NBA in terms of a trade since then. I know Shaq got traded from the Lakers to Miami, but I think this would be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We've been saying now for about a month, Sap, the NBA seems to be in like a bit of a holding pattern with this, and that remains true. Are you surprised that Joe Tsai didn't just say, okay, we'll get rid of Steve Nash or Sean Marks?
I just don't think a guy like that likes an ultimatum. I mean, he paid $3.3 billion for the team, and he brought in Kevin Durant.
So you think it's as simple
Kyrie
as that?
Irving.
He just
it could be, doesn't want to be told what to do. Yeah. I mean, I don't think these guys that are worth that kind of money. And again, he wasn't gifted the money. He was someone who built up Alibaba, which is a massive Chinese company. So he's got an ego of himself, right? That's what people forget is, the players have egos, the coaches have egos. I think the owners have bigger egos. I mean, do you think Steve Ballmer has a massive ego? I would hope so. We know Mark Cuban has a massive ego. James Dolan, go right down the list. They all have massive egos. So they're not going to just back down. I think the smart thing for Brooklyn would be to trade Kevin Durant, trade Kyrie Irving, get back as much as you can, and just build from there. Look, getting Jaylen Brown, Derek White, draft picks, whatever you can get from the Lakers, if it's draft picks. I know Russell Westbrook isn't the best thing to get back for Kyrie Irving, but it's an expiring contract. You can get dumped into free agency a year later. But Joe Tsai probably looks at Kevin Durant and says, you came here 3 years ago. I gave you everything you wanted. By the way, the Nets have committed so far to Kevin Durant 7 years, $320 million. I mean, he just is going into the first year of a 4-year, nearly $200 million deal. And that's after 3 years at $120 million. They've committed a ton of money to him and Kyrie Irving, although
and they
just
paid him 1 year
Kyrie,
to just sit at home.
They knew he wasn't going to play that year. And you want James Harden? We'll go get James Harden. We're going to trade Karis LeVert and Jared Allen and, Spencer Dinwiddie, guys that we really like, that we're building a nice culture in Brooklyn. Just think if Brooklyn just signed Durant and Kyrie Irving and kept them with Jared Allen, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Karis LeVert, that would be a really good team. Much better. But Durant wanted James Harden, and then James Harden got tired of Kyrie Irving, so they moved on from Harden and brought in Ben Simmons, who never played. So now we've got a total mess. I mean, look, players should play, and executives should be executives. I mean, it's not often that players make all the right moves. LeBron's been a de facto general manager for a lot of his career, and he's done some good things, but he's also done some really stupid things. One of them was bringing Russell Westbrook to the Lakers when they should have gone in a different direction. It did not work well last year with the Lakers, and they're stuck with Westbrook this year unless they can just get rid of him for Kyrie Irving in some sort of contract swap. But yeah, I mean, I think Joe Tsai is going to stand by this. He's going to stick by his general manager and coach and eventually trade Kevin Durant. That's the way I see this happening.
I think that's a pretty good read on it, Sap. The one thing that stood out to me, though, when talking about this, is I think Sean Marks actually is a pretty good GM. So I don't have so much of a problem with him. But we were talking about this during the playoffs. Steve Nash is way over his head as a coach. So, I mean, listen, maybe it might come down to, just like you said, stubbornness from Joe Tsai, loyalty, whatever you want to call it. But, Steve Nash, his performance doesn't indicate that you should be loyal to him based off of, I think this guy is the guy to, carry us to the next level. I just don't think he knows what the hell he's doing as a coach.
No. I mean, he did not look very good in his first 2 years with Brooklyn. I mean, he got outcoached by Mike Budenholzer in the second round of the playoffs in 2021. And I'm not a huge fan of Budenholzer, but he did outcoach Steve Nash. And Nash last year was pretty much manhandled by Ime Udoka, who is someone that Kevin Durant likes and respects. That's why you could see that connection with Boston. And then Jaylen Brown, obviously, along with, I believe, Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram would be one of the three players that would be at the highest level in a potential deal for Kevin Durant. So this is going to happen probably in the next 5-6 weeks as you get into training camp. You want to get it done before the season so everybody can kind of get going in their direction, because this can just kind of hang over a team, especially Brooklyn. You've got, okay, Kevin Durant's not showing up to camp. It's going to dominate. What are you going to do with him? Look what happened with Philadelphia last year. You had Ben Simmons holding that organization hostage. Finally, you moved on from him, several months into the season, and they never really got going. So I think if you're Brooklyn, you just cut your losses at this point and say, okay, he doesn't want to play here. He's never happy. He might appear happy at the beginning of the season and within 3 months be miserable. So let's move on from him. Let's not forget, outside of his stay in Golden State, Kevin Durant's played 12 years in the league and has gone to the finals once. I mean, he is a great player, there's no question, but he's only won in stacked situations where he came on board with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and a team that had already won a championship, and then the next year set the record for most wins in a single season, and then lost in 7 games to Cleveland. He shows up, and of course, they're unbeatable. But, he's not the guy that builds the culture of an organization. He's more of a follower than a leader. So I would move on from him if I'm Brooklyn. He's going to be 34 in September. He's got a lot of mileage on him and a lot of injury questions. At this point, just move on from him, move on from Kyrie. And at some point, Joe Tsai might say, geez, I got my organization back. See what happens with Sean Marks, who I agree, I think is a good executive, and maybe Steve Nash grows into the job, and you can always replace a coach pretty easily in this league.
Absolutely. And, it seems like the league also believes that it's a fait accompli that Kevin Durant's not going to be a member of the Nets next season, as they release their Christmas schedule, and or it's leaked. I'm not sure which one happened first, but the Nets are not on it, and you would anticipate a team with Kevin Durant would be on the Christmas schedule. So the league obviously doesn't believe that he's going to be a Net. So this is what we got for the NBA's sort of marquee date in the season. Celtics are going to be hosting the Milwaukee Bucks. That's probably the marquee game of the Eastern Conference. 76ers going to the Knicks. And then we got 3 games in the Western Conference: Suns at the Denver Nuggets, Lakers and the Dallas Mavericks, and the Memphis Grizzlies and Golden State Warriors in a playoff rematch from last year. So those are the teams the NBA feels like are their biggest attraction. That's how they stack the Christmas Day schedule. Sap, do you have any problems with any of these matchups?
It looks pretty good to me. Now they've released the times of these games, and the NBA is pretty smart because the NFL has 3 games on Christmas Day. Remember last year they had 2 games, and the marquee game last year was the Browns at the Packers, and they got 30 million viewers and destroyed the NBA in terms of ratings. Look, we love the NBA. I love the NFL as well. If they're head-to-head, the NFL is going to win those matchups 3 or 4 to 1. So the NBA is trying to figure out a way to get the biggest audiences they can with these 5 games, because they know what the NFL games are that day. So 76ers at Knicks will be the noon tip-off. And the Knicks are always playing on Christmas Day, whether they're good or bad. I mean, it's the New York Knicks. It's the biggest market, so they'll kick off the day, or tip off the day. Kickoff is for football. That's at 12 o'clock. Then you get the Lakers-Dallas at 2:30, which that you would think would normally be a marquee game, but the Lakers did make the playoffs last year. Dallas is great with Luka Doncic, and you got LeBron against Luka. That's going to be the 2:30 game. Then the Bucks at Celtics, which is the best game of the day. They had that great 7-game series last year in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. That's at 5 o'clock. Memphis at Golden State, a rematch of the second round series from a year ago, is at 8 o'clock. And then Phoenix at Denver is at 10:30. Now, if you look at this year's NFL games on Christmas Day, you've got Green Bay at Miami at 1 o'clock. So smartly, the NBA says, well, we don't want to put the Bucks in that window. So they're going to play at 5 o'clock so that you get the most eyeballs in Wisconsin on both games. I mean, the Packers, Bucks, if they go head to head, the Packers will outdraw the Bucks 3-4, 5-1. I mean, that's religion in Wisconsin. The second game, the NFL that day, is Denver at the Rams. That's a 4:30 game. So the Lakers will be playing at 2:30, and I think the Lakers are the one team in the NBA that will outdraw its city neighbor in the NFL. The Lakers will outdraw the Rams in LA. It's a bigger brand. It's still not a pro football town, in my opinion, in LA.
Especially if LeBron is, if they're healthy. Yes. If they're not, then it's a different story.
That could be different. And it's a 2:30 game, so that game ends at 5, and by 4:30 is the kickoff of the Denver Rams game. So you could watch the Lakers Dallas at 2:30. When that wraps up, flip over to Denver and the Rams, and they'll probably be early in the first quarter. The night game is Tampa against Arizona. So you get the Suns at Denver at 10:30. But then again, I think that they'll overlap a little bit, but not so much. So the NBA did the best it could with this schedule to not compete head to head with the NFL in terms of markets. Because as soon as I heard Green Bay playing at 1:00 on Christmas Day, I'm like, there's no way the Bucks are going to play in the first 2 windows because they would get destroyed there. So obviously, the Bucks Celtics is a marquee game, and they'll be going head to head against Denver and the Rams. I think they'll hold their own against Denver and the Rams. The Rams, even though the defending Super Bowl champs, are about the 8th most popular team in LA. And I'm talking football team in LA. I'm dead serious about that, Jed. I think we've had this discussion before. When I look at the most popular teams in LA in terms of football, I think the Raiders are still the most popular team in LA. I mean, you were just out there, a month ago? You probably saw more Raider gear.
Way more Raiders. Way more
anything.
Raiders gear. Yeah, there's not a lot of Rams gear. There's not a lot of Chargers gear either.
Even less Chargers gear, right?
Yeah.
And then I would say after that, it's probably Cowboys, Packers, and Steelers, who are the 3 biggest national brands. Then I'd say USC is right there. USC actually might be number 2 after the Raiders, especially now that Lincoln Riley's the head coach. So the Rams are like the 8th most popular football team in LA, and they're the defending Super Bowl champs. So I think that, the Bucks and Celtics will hold its own going opposite that game. And then at night, you got Brady at Arizona. So the Suns may get dented a little bit because they're playing Denver, but that's an interesting game. But I think the NBA did the best it could in trying to avoid these matchups against the NFL. Next year, Christmas is on a Monday, so I'm sure there'll be one Christmas Day game, or maybe they'll play 2 of them. I don't know. The NFL does whatever it wants, and everybody else has to react. Luckily for the NBA, the NFL schedule comes out first, and then the NBA can react after that, because that's the way they have to do it. They're not stupid. They're smart. They understand that, the NFL is king by far.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's just, everybody love, we all love the NBA here, and it's still a growing league, in terms of audience, which is great because, they have a young audience. It's really getting engaged with the sport too, but it's still, you're going up against a behemoth. So you have to be realistic, and know your limits. And Adam Silver and the rest of the NBA owners seem to know that, it's a losing battle going 1-on-1 against football. That's okay. That doesn't mean the NBA is not still extremely popular, but you got to, know your limits and not put yourself in a position to fail. Other interesting sort of, NBA schedule news that has come out, Sap, is opening night. We're going to get the 2 teams currently with 17 championships. They're not playing against each other, but they are both on opening the season. The Celtics and the 76ers are going to tip off the season at October 18th at 7:30. That's going to be on, these games are going to be on TNT, Sap. So we'll see Barkley and the whole crew there. So Celtics and Sixers renew their rivalry. They didn't end up meeting in the playoffs last year, but 2 of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And perhaps Kevin Durant will be a 76er or a Celtic at that point. Don't know. But that should be regardless of if Durant's on either of those teams, should be a marquee matchup with Harden and Embiid going up against Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and the new look Celtics with Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari. And then the Lakers, because they're the Lakers, even though they didn't make the playoffs last year, they're obviously going to open the season because LeBron and company and the Warriors are going to get their rings that night in San Francisco. And we'll see where the Lakers are at and matching up against the defending champions on opening night at 10 o'clock Eastern.
Now, will LeBron be on the bench watching the ring ceremony, or will he just be back in the locker room?
Locker room, I think.
Why not? I would too, right? I mean, it's not my ring, it's their ring.
Right. He wasn't even close last year, so he shouldn't be close to the ring. So
no, he's got one more ring in him. Now that he's signed for 2 more years, he's got 3 years. I think he's got one more ring in him, which would be pretty good, because then he'd equal Duncan, Kobe, and Magic.
Not with this roster.
No, but again, just got to maybe put together a couple of good players on there. get a shooter or two, or maybe Kyrie Irving is there. This year's going to be tough if they can't get rid of Westbrook. But no, that's a good opening night. And again, like you said, Jed, you might see Kevin Durant playing for the Celtics on October 18th, or you might see him playing on the 76ers on October 18th. I mean, those right now are considered the two front runners, but I also think those other surprise teams that we talked about, New Orleans, Denver, Toronto, can be in play. Miami and Phoenix, it's difficult because they're kind of shut out because of contract mechanisms, right? DeAndre Ayton can't get moved till midseason, and he has to approve the trade. And meanwhile, Miami just doesn't have the pieces because Bam Adebayo can't be traded to a team that has Ben Simmons. Now, if you get a third team involved, maybe it can happen. But still a lot can happen in the next 2 months before this season kicks off. And in fact, as we've seen before, you get into the season, Kevin Durant might still be on the Brooklyn Nets holding out, and then they finally trade him by Thanksgiving. I mean, remember Harden got traded in early December, back when he got moved from, actually it was later than that because that was the pandemic year that he got moved, several weeks in the season from Houston to Brooklyn back in 2020. So yeah, you could see all these things happen as we get into the season. That's the way it works in the NBA. Different in football, especially with a quarterback. You got to get the quarterback in, get him set up with the offense. In basketball, well, Kevin Durant could step onto a team and be efficient like from day one.
Oh yeah, I mean he's never gonna have a problem on a basketball court. He's just he's a basketball savant. He's big and can shoot over everybody. He'll be fine wherever he goes. Easy to play with. And like every good NBA season, some exciting returns should be happening early in the season. New Orleans opens their season actually against the aforementioned Brooklyn Nets. So maybe Zion seems like he'll be ready to go. Perhaps Ben Simmons in that game too. So two guys who didn't play at all last season could be making their returns the same night on the day after the season opens. The Denver Nuggets open their season on October 19th as well. And Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. perhaps will be back in that game. So some exciting returns set to happen. Just a couple other notable dates, Sap, in terms of interesting matchups based off of guys who are making their returns to or playing against other teams. Nets 76ers, the Harden, whole Harden situation and Ben Simmons looming over that. You obviously are interested to see if Ben Simmons is going to play in Philadelphia. That game will be November 22nd. I'm sure he will not be received well if he plays. He was not received well when he was sitting on the bench in Philadelphia. So that game will be interesting. Rudy Gobert returns to Utah on December 9th. And Celtics and Lakers, their first meeting this season is on December 13th. And that game will be in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I always look forward to those games. Obviously, I mean, you get the two most prestigious franchises in the league. The Celtics are still title contenders. The Lakers, not so much right now, but Lakers Celtics, always a good take, as is Celtics 76ers. I mean, the Lakers and Celtics had the great rivalry in the 80s, but before that, it was actually Celtics 76ers. That was the more heated rivalry, late 70s into the early 80s, because the Celtics and 76ers would always meet in the Eastern Conference Finals to decide who was going to play the Lakers. So those are all still pretty fascinating because you get the Celtics and 76ers are still very relevant teams. And look, as long as LeBron James is on the Lakers and a somewhat healthy Anthony Davis, they should be relevant too.
The last thing I want to say about the schedule, Sap, before we wrap up with one more topic is the NBA has decided this year to take Election Day off. And have no games on that slate, so people can focus on the midterm elections and can go vote and not have to have any sort of conflict of interest. I also imagine that means a lot of their players will be participating in, rally the votes or helping people, maybe shuttling people. I'm not sure what the NBA has planned, but I think that that's a great move. And as always, the NBA sort of under Adam Silver trying to lead by example. I think you and I are pretty like-minded in that it should be a federal holiday, Election Day. It's kind of crazy that it's not, considering some of the other ridiculous federal holidays we have. But the NBA is putting their money where their mouth is, and their players, a lot of them are very active in politics in terms of trying to rally their communities to vote and be more engaged. And so the NBA has taken it upon themselves to make sure they don't have any games on Election Day this year. Something I imagine they're going to just continue to do now, and this will be sort of standard practice, but definitely a leading by example moment for the NBA.
Yeah, I'm sure Fox News is real thrilled with this. I'm sure this isn't leading their, Hannity or whoever else is going to bloviate about this, saying the league is too involved. But no, it's a good move by the NBA. Obviously, I agree with you. It should be a federal holiday, and I think it should be on a weekend. Most other countries have elections on a Saturday when people are off and have plenty of time to actually go out and vote. We have it on a Tuesday because, most people go to work on Tuesday and they've got kids to get off to school and pick kids up after school. So they don't get a chance to vote. And that's exactly how the incumbents like it.
Yeah, it's voter suppression is essentially what it is. It's a tricky way of doing voter suppression, but the NBA is saying not so fast, my friend, and trying to change some hearts and minds about whether it should be a holiday or not. So I thought that was worth noting. And Sep, last thing we're going to talk about today, just really briefly, is something that we've talked about before. Unfortunately, we talked about it before he passed away, but and I think a little bit after, but Bill Russell's number 6 is going to be retired throughout the NBA in perpetuity. And there will be a 6 patch on all the NBA players' jerseys this upcoming season. I think that's obviously the right move, something that we talked about, Sep, a couple of years ago, I think. If anybody deserves to have their number retired throughout the league, a la Jackie Robinson in the MLB and Wayne Gretzky in NHL, it's Bill Russell. And so that is going to happen. There's some discussion about why didn't the NBA just do this while Bill Russell was alive so we could have seen it. And yeah, okay. But it's, people are reactionary and that's unfortunately how it goes sometimes. But it's a fitting tribute for somebody whose legacy is far bigger than just the NBA.
Right, off the court, if not more than on the court, where he won 11 championships. I wish it was done earlier. We had talked about it, retired number 6 while the great Mr. Bill Russell was alive to enjoy that. The patch on the uniform is a classy move. And also they're going to have a shamrock with the number 6 on the score near the scores table on the side of the court throughout the league. So that's going to be good as well. Wish it was done earlier. The patch in the shamrock with the number 6, that's in honor of a man who passed away, and that's a great move by the NBA. The retiring number 6, I wish it had been done earlier. So now there's 3 athletes, North American team sport athletes, that have their numbers retired. 99 in hockey for Wayne Gretzky, 42 in baseball, obviously with Jackie Robinson, and now number 6 for Bill Russell. I've got a column coming up on Full Press Coverage talking about that, I guess better late than never, but it should have been done earlier. But I think it's time now for the city of Boston to step up. They have a statue of Bill Russell, which is not in Government Center, not in City Hall Plaza, but it's next to City Hall near the former Wax Museum and a Staples store. I mean, it's kind of hidden where it's difficult to find. I think that statue should be in front of TD Garden. And I know that the Bruins, not the Celtics, own TD Garden, but I'm sure Rick Grossbeck and the Celtics could work something out that statue should be in front of TD Garden so Celtic fans on their way in can pay respect to Bill Russell. We also live in a city that is Ted Williams Tunnel, David Ortiz Drive, David Ortiz Bridge. We have nothing for Bill Russell. Maybe rename Causeway Street Bill Russell Way. Now, I think all of that would be great. And it's a little superficial because I think this man was bigger than just basketball. I think the greatest honor would be if you renamed a public school, notably a high school, after Bill Russell in the city of Boston. This way, the students that go to that school could learn about the history of Bill Russell and also learn about the history of their city. An important part of teaching history is not just sugarcoating great events in the city, but also telling the truth about really bad things that happened in the city. We know what happened with Bill Russell while he was here for 13 years and how much racism and vitriol was hurled at him. I think renaming a public high school after Bill Russell would be a great move on the part of the city of Boston.
I think those are all wonderful ideas, and I'd love to see them implemented. We know the wheels of government often move slowly, but there seems to be, if the time is now, obviously, that there's momentum on that side. So I would love to see that happen. There's obviously plenty of high schools in Boston, and I'm sure, could use a different name, and that would be a really great tribute. And I'm sure that would be what the man would probably appreciate the most. Rather than a road or a bridge or a tunnel or whatever. I mean, I'm sure that him and his family would appreciate that too, but it's all great ideas, Sap. I'd love to see them implemented. They don't even have to move the statue from where it is now. They could build another one. He did,
right.
Anybody deserves 2 statues. Sure, build 2 statues for him. So I'd love to see that happen. Maybe your article will put a campaign to have the city government and Mayor Wu make some of these sort of changes. I think those are all great ideas, Sap. I give my endorsement to all of them.
Thank you. And
You're
also,
very
I think there's plenty of players in the league that would contribute to a scholarship fund to give high school students in Boston college scholarships as well. I mean, there's so many things that can be done, because I think he still was so respected by the current players, right? I mean, LeBron James, respected the hell out of Bill Russell, because Bill Russell was always showing up the NBA Finals. Heck, the Finals MVP is named after him, and you could just tell that, when LeBron got to meet him probably for the first time, and thereafter, that he was kind of awestruck by Bill Russell, a giant on and off the court in so many ways. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done, and I think it's time for the city of Boston to step up. And I think Michelle Wu, who's the current mayor, is cognizant of these types of things.
Again, go check out Sap's article on Full Press Coverage if you want to read the whole thing, and I'm sure he'll tweet it out there. You can check out Sap's Twitter at JohnSap25, and my Twitter is at JetStryer. And so we're all going to continue to wait for what goes on in the NBA with Kevin Durant, but we do have a lot of Donovan Mitchell talks about the Knicks, so that could happen imminently, and we will be here to respond to all of it. So make sure that you're checking out all the latest updates on the podcast, on Full Press Coverage, and on our social medias. Sap, that's going to do it for us. I appreciate your time, my friend, and we will be back later with a new edition of the podcast. See you, everybody.